My name is Mark Denison. I'm the head of the music program here at TCC. I've been here since August of 2014. I oversee the Associate of Fine Arts in Music and the development of the music program. I teach courses, the music theory courses, as well as direct two of the ensembles, the small chamber orchestra and the jazz ensemble.
Would you like to know what's going on in my mind?
What made you want to start teaching here?
This position came open and it looked like a good departure from where I was at the time. I was living in Idaho with my family, wife and two kids and two pets, and that program was kind of on the way out, and this opportunity arose. So flew out here, interviewed for the job, and was lucky enough to get selected.
The TCC Jazz Band, how did it start?
The jazz ensemble actually started a few years before I got here. One of the previous instructors is a gentleman by the name of Chris Card. He developed this program out of a jazz improvisation class. This improvisation class sort of morphed into an actual ensemble. When I took it over in the fall of 2014, the class became an actual ensemble with learning outcomes that fit the ensemble type of coursework to perform regularly out in the community, to perform concerts here in the Roper Performing Arts Center at the TCC Norfolk campus.
What instruments make up a jazz band?
There's a few instruments that generally are the mainstays. We have our rhythm section, which are primarily keyboard instruments, such as grand piano or keyboards. We have the guitar, we have a bass guitar or an upright bass, and then we have drums and percussion. Drums set, generally speaking, for the traditional jazz setting. We also have auxiliary percussion for things like Latin jazz, speaking of like congas, cabasas, claves, those sorts of things for the rhythm section. Sometimes you might see vibraphones as part of the rhythm section. Then we have our horns in the band. Typically they fall into three categories: trumpets, trombones, and saxophones. And then last but not least, one of the most important mainstays for the jazz ensemble is the vocalist.
What instruments do you play?
I am actually primarily a brass guy. I play trombone. I have played in our jazz ensemble. I played trumpet. I play upright bass and bass guitar. And I've played a couple of concerts when I didn't have a keyboard player. I've actually played the piano for some of the numbers. I haven't played saxophone yet for the band or drum set, but you never know. Sometimes stranger things happen.
Why do you love jazz so much?
Well, jazz is considered America's classical music. It grew out of the experience of black musicians and juxtaposed more urbanization for the turn of the century, from the 1800s to the 1900s. It's one of the few unique art forms that have come from the United States to the rest of the world. It gave rise to a number of other art forms, including rock and roll, rhythm and blues. To a certain extent, it has affected things like bluegrass and country music. All popular music styles have been influenced by jazz music. It itself has been influenced by other styles of music that were popular. European dance music, like minuets and waltzes, ragtime music, which came from the riverboats and saloons along the Mississippi and up and down the Midwest, post-Civil War era marches, blues music, gospel music. It's a real crossroads of musical styles and genres. So the great thing about it is that you never really get bored with any one style of jazz music because it encompasses so many different expressions. So it's kind of like a never-ending well of exploration. So
who are your jazz inspirations?
Probably One of my biggest jazz inspirations is the trumpet player Miles Davis. When I was in my early teens, I asked a teacher, hey, what are some musicians I can listen to get a little bit more into this thing called jazz. At the age of 14, I got to see the trumpet player Maynard Ferguson in concert. We had played for a jazz festival. Our junior high jazz ensemble played for this jazz festival. We stayed for this concert, and it was just a mind-blowing experience to be in this auditorium, much like our Roper Performing Arts Auditorium, but down towards the front. The band was just so loud and it blew us all away. We were just amazed. Had another experience like that, bass guitarist by the name of Stanley Clark in Mannheim, Germany. My father was in the army. We got stationed in Europe. We went to Mannheim, my sister and I, and we saw Stanley Clark in concert. And it was just another one of those mind-blowing experiences. A lot of us jazzers, and it's no different with me, we are influenced by Duke Ellington, who is arguably one of the first African-American composers to write jazz music using advanced harmonic theory. But Duke Ellington was kind of a game changer, and anybody who studies jazz music is pretty much, we can trace a lot of the more advanced harmonic things that we do to experimentation that he started back in the 1930s and the 1940s.
So what are the constant challenges you face, and how do you overcome them?
Practice. One of the things of being a musician is always about the never-ending goal to strive for perfection. Pretty much unreachable, but we spend long hours practicing by ourselves, practicing with and rehearsing with other people, trying to perfect a sound, trying to perfect a song. As you get older, you have other responsibilities that pull you away from those sorts of things. It's also a comfort zone. Being in solitary confinement with my horn, it's something that it's like a comfortable place for me to be. It's a challenge sometimes to allot the time to do that, but the rewards are monumental, not only to my sense of well-being as a musician, but to my sense of well-being as a person, as a human being, because it's also expression, it's personal expression, and it's something that's very precious to me.
Where do you think jazz is heading in this day and age?
Miles Davis, again, one of my influences, was one of the first real big progenitors of this thing we call fusion jazz. Basically, it's the fusing of different genres of music, rock and jazz, R&B and jazz, funk and jazz. And so I think pretty much the direction jazz, if it's not quote-unquote traditional jazz, the direction jazz is taking is really, it's just expanding upon that fusion of multiple styles. Popular music groups like Earth, Wind & Fire have mixed world music, like Maurice White used to have the kalimba, which is an African thumb piano mixed in this funk setting, which is more of a jazz setting, the rhythm section with horns and vocalists. But there was also Latin jazz. There was the auxiliary percussion. It's always been this fusing of styles and reworking. It's kind of like taking the letters of the alphabet and making new words. Basically, jazz is now in that phase where we're inventing new words.
Well, what do you say to those who don't listen to jazz music and maybe think they don't like it? How would you encourage them? What would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, they haven't listened to enough. Second of all, is that they may not have really been listening to what they were hearing. One of the things that we realize with jazz music, it's a conversation that happens in the moment. And I say they haven't listened enough. Maybe I should qualify that statement by saying they haven't listened to enough live jazz. Because one of the things that happens with jazz music, if you listen to a recording, you don't get a sense of that conversation. You don't get a sense of that spur of the moment decision that a musician has to express this thought, this musical thought, that musical idea, this musical concept. And it happens in the spur of the moment. And it's a trade-off between different musicians, the rhythm section, the horn players, the vocalists, and they feed off of each other. It's not about going into a recording and making a perfect record. It's live music, one take, everybody has their say, and good, bad, ugly, everything is all in, and we just make that adjustment that way. So somebody who says they're not really into jazz, I would encourage them to go and listen to a live jazz performance. For the sound check, the engineer that we have, a gentleman by the name of Christian Garthright, who's one of the finest engineers I've ever worked with, he has to make sure that everything is tweaked so that there's no feedback, that there's no sound loops that happen, which is kind of a lengthy process. Luckily, over the last 4 years, we've developed a really good feel between the engineering side of it and then the actual just performance side of it. We've developed a pretty good feel as to where those balances are, and so it's kind of become more intuitive, and we're able to tweak it on the fly more. But getting to that stage, it took a lot of work on his part, on Christian's part, on our part as performers, making sure that we made it easy enough for him to make the adjustments, and that he knew what adjustments he would need to make in order so that we sound like we need to be able to sound. So, but it's been a great relationship with the tech side of the performance as well as just the actual musical side. The TCC Blue Moon Jazz Ensemble, and one of the best houses in the city of Norfolk and in the Hampton Roads, the Roper Performing Arts Ensemble.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sharing this evening with us. We love sharing this evening with you. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day to the mothers. Happy Father's Day to the fathers in the future. And have a great night.